Top 5 most powerful nuclear bombs ever tested. As far as we know, the 4 most powerful nuclear bombs ever tested were tested in Russia. The only one that is not Russian on this list is the one tested by the United States. Here is the list. Number 1. Castle Bravo, TX-21. Castle Bravo was the first in a series of high-yield thermonuclear weapon design tests conducted by the United States at Bikini Atoll, Marshall Islands, as part of Operation Castle. Detonated on March 1st, 1954, the device was the most powerful nuclear device detonated by the United States in its first lithium deuteride-fueled thermonuclear weapon. Castle Bravo's yield was 15 megatons of TNT, 2.5 times the predicted 6 megatons, due to unforeseen additional reaction involving lithium-7, which led to the unexpected radioactive contamination of areas to the east of Bikini Atoll. At the time, it was the most powerful artificial explosion in history. Fallout, the heaviest of which was in the form of pulverized surface coral from the detonation, fell on residents Rongelap and Utirik atolls, while the more particulate and gaseous fallout spread around the world. The inhabitants of the islands were not evacuated until 3 days later and suffered radiation sickness. Following the test, the United States Department of Energy estimated that 253 inhabitants of the Marshall Islands were impacted by the radioactive fallout. This single test exposed the surrounding populations to varying levels of radiation. The fallout levels attributed to the Castle Bravo test are the highest in history. Populations neighboring the test site were exposed to high levels of radiation, resulting in mild radiation sickness of many: nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Several weeks later, many people began suffering from alopecia, hair loss, and skin lesions as well. They also developed a much higher chance of getting thyroid and cervical cancer and dying from it. 23 crew members of the Japanese fishing vessel Daigo Fukuryu Maru, Lucky Dragon No. 5, were also contaminated by the heavy fallout, experiencing acute radiation syndrome. The blast incited international reaction over atmospheric thermonuclear testing. Number 2, Number 3, and Number 4 are all Russian tests. There is not much known about these tests, except for the details of strengths and location where the test was performed. Russia, instead of giving names to their nuclear tests, gives it numbers. These test numbers were Test 147, Test 174, and Test 219. All of these tests were performed in 1962. The strength of Test 147 was about 21.1 megatons. Test 173 was about 19.1 megatons. Test 219 was about 24.2 megatons. They were all performed at Novaya Zemlya in Russia. This is the exact place. The strength of all three in comparison was at least 800 times larger than the Hiroshima bomb. Number 5. Tsar Bomba. The largest ever nuclear explosion was also performed by Russia. It was the Tsar Bomba. Tsar Bomba is the largest nuclear device ever detonated and the most powerful man-made explosion in history. The bomb had a yield of 50 megatons of TNT. The Tsar Bomba was a 3-stage hydrogen bomb with a Trunev-Baviev second and third stage design. A 3-stage hydrogen bomb uses a fission-type atomic bomb at the first stage to compress the thermonuclear second stage. The energy produced from this explosion is then directed to compress the much larger thermonuclear third stage. There is evidence that Tsar Bomba utilized several third stages. Tsar Bomba could have theoretically yielded as much as 100 megatons, but it would have resulted in a dangerous level of nuclear fallout. Additionally, the delivery plane would not have had sufficient time to retreat to a safe distance. Therefore, to minimize nuclear fallout, the third stage incorporated a lead tamper instead of uranium-238 fusion tamper. A Tu-95V Soviet long-range bomber, piloted by Major Andrei Durnovstev, delivered Tsar Bomba during the test. The bomber was accompanied by a Tu-16 observer plane that was responsible for collecting air samples and filming the test. A reflective white paint was used on the planes to minimize thermal damage to their surfaces. Tsar Bomba weighed 27 metric tons, or 59,525 pounds. It was 26 feet in length and 6.9 feet in diameter. Tsar Bomba was attached to a parachute weighing nearly 1,800 pounds, which provided the bomber and observer planes additional time to fly approximately 30 miles away from ground zero prior to detonation. Despite the addition of reflective paint and the parachute, a 50-50 chance of survival was predicted for those on board. On October 30th, 1961, Tsar Bomba was detonated in the atmosphere at 11:32 Moscow time over the Mityushka Bay nuclear testing range in the northern Arctic Circle. The bomb was set by barometric sensors to detonate at 13,000 feet and was dropped from a height of 34,000 feet. The Tsar Bomba yield was approximately 1,570 times more powerful than the yield of the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, and 10 times more powerful than all of the conventional weapons exploded during World War II. Tsar Bomba also represented 25% of the estimated yield of the Krakatoa volcanic eruption of 1883, and 10% of all nuclear tests by this point. By comparison, the B-41, the largest United States nuclear weapon, had a theoretical yield of 25 megatons. The largest nuclear device ever detonated by the United States was Castle Bravo, with a yield of 15 megatons. The largest nuclear weapon deployed by the Soviet Union, the SS-18 Mod 3 ICBM warhead, was also approximately 25 megatons. All of the wooden and brick buildings in nearby Severny, located 34 miles from the aiming point of Ground Zero, were annihilated. In other Soviet districts located over 100 miles from Ground Zero, wooden houses were demolished, and brick and stone ones suffered damages. Radio communication outages were also reported. One test witness felt the thermal effects at a distance of 170 miles, even with dark goggles. The intense heat from the detonation was capable of causing third-degree burns at a distance of 62 miles from Ground Zero. The shockwave was felt as far away as the Dixon settlement located 430 miles away, and windows shattered at a distance of 560 miles. Windows even shattered as far away as Norway and Finland due to atmospheric focusing of the shockwave. Despite being an air burst detonated 13,000 feet above ground, Tsar Bomba's seismic magnitude was estimated at 5 or 5.25. The original Atomic Energy Commission estimate of the Tsar Bomba yield was 55 to 60 megatons, but since the end of the Cold War and fall of the Soviet Union, all Russian sources have confirmed its yield as 50 megatons. Even though calculations suggested the explosion would reach the ground, this was prevented when the bomb's extremely large shockwave was reflected. The fireball nearly reached the altitude of the release aircraft. At the point of detonation, the aircraft dropped approximately 1/2 mile in altitude due to the shockwave, but would make it to safety. The Tsar Bomba mushroom cloud was approximately 40 miles high, 7 times higher than the Mount Everest. The cloud reached higher than the stratosphere at its highest altitude. The top of the cloud had a width of 59 miles and the base a width of 25 miles. Thank you for watching, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.